Assalamu alaikum and welcome back uh, to the Islamophobia files, where we document, expose, and challenge the systems, narratives, and policies that sustain anti Muslim racism around the world. I'm your host, Dr. Hatem Bazian. Today, we examine a story that encapsulates the lived reality of Muslims navigating borders, surveillance, and security apparatus, as well as the imposed limits on free speech that too often criminalizes identity rather than behavior. Our guest, our beloved Sami Hamdi, a well known journalist and analyst, recently experienced detention by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, despite holding the proper documentation and a visa that allowed him to enter and exit the United States for 10 years, as far as I know. He was detained without explanation here in the Bay Area, released without an apology, and then had his visa revoked without due process. His case raises glaring questions about US immigration enforcement, targeting of Muslim travelers, the border implications for their rights, freedoms, and democratic norms. As far as I understand it, it's his speech, the ability to speak on Palestine, on genocide, and therefore today, speaking about genocide, Islamophobia, and the imposed limits on Muslims' free speech. So, Sami, welcome, and it's good to have you with us on a Blessed Friday.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Hatem.
It's a pleasure. So, can you just walk us through what happened, so at least everybody is aware of what occurred, because it's not normal. We're living in exceptional times. So, what took place in terms of your case?
2 weeks prior to my detainment, my detention, my incarceration, there was an individual online called Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh D'Souza from the right wing, quite extreme Israeli lobby. Dinesh D'Souza tweeted a video, a clip from a lecture that I gave in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, in which I told an audience rather passionately that because they screamed on social media, because they raised their voices for Palestine, Americans are finally seeing the truth, and hearts are changing in places we never thought they could change. And I gave the example of Tucker Carlson, of Candace Owens, and these others, indicating that if you keep speaking about these issues and Americans can hear you, their hearts can flip. Dinesh D'Souza took this clip and tweeted on the top, "Muslim Brotherhood jihadist celebrates the efforts of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson in spreading Islam in America." Something that Brock would respond and say, there is nothing in the video that indicates anything of what Dinesh says. But that didn't matter to a senator called Ted Cruz of Texas, who retweeted it. When Ted Cruz retweeted it, I landed on the radar of a certain extreme Israeli lobbyist called Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer on the Monday before my incarceration tweeted, there is an individual, I'm paraphrasing, but going around America, criticizing the Israelis, we need to get rid of his visa. On the Wednesday, she tweeted, I'm in Congress. It's disgusting the way Muslims wash in the bathroom in preparation for their prayer. But I have very good news coming to you in 2 days about a certain individual currently touring the United States. And I knew she was talking about me, and I messaged my lawyers and the like. On the Friday, I gave a lecture in the Bay Area, Saturday in Sacramento. The irony is in Sacramento, I was giving a speech in which I said, everybody has a duty to save America from the Israel First lobby, to save the American going bankrupt on medical bills by insisting that America should spend $14 billion not on supporting genocide and free healthcare for the Israelis, but on its own population. The following morning, I arrive in San Francisco airport at about 6:45. My flight is 7:30 a.m. to Florida. I was supposed to give a lecture in Tampa and then New York and then go home. I check in my luggage. I pass through security. I'm wearing a Malaysian batik that the Americans call the disco shirt. May Allah forgive them. And I'm looking up to see where gate D38 is. Is it right? Is it left? As I'm looking up, a man approaches me who's clearly been waiting for me for a while. The man comes and says, excuse me, are you Sami Hamdi? I said, yes. He said, sir, I'm here to inform you that your visa was revoked 2 days ago. I said, what? He said, and here is the memo from the State Department. So I read it, and it doesn't say anything about any crime or charges or the like. It just says we have the right to revoke the visa whenever we want under section this, article this, and the like. So I
So
said,
was the letter addressed to you directly, or
it
is
was
it one
addressed to
of
the
those?
agent
So
saying,
there's a
under section this, we have revoked this foreign alien's visa. And
okay.
we command you, it says, every agent to detain this foreign alien upon sight. And
And
later on,
up
I
to
would
that
read the
point, you had no communication because I
none.
assume that they have your phone numbers, they have your email, because when you apply to visa, all the details at the U.S. Embassy are provided. So aside from that letter that is handed to you at the airport around what they call gate D9 or D8, that's the only time that you actually received the letter that directed to the agent, not to you.
No letter, no phone call, no text message, no indication in any way whatsoever that my visa is under review. And the letter given to me, the memo from the State Department, is not even addressed to me. I'm actually
Okay.
glad you asked that question. I had forgotten this detail in the other interviews. The letter wasn't addressed to me. The letter was, dear agents, under section this, article this, we've revoked this person's visa. We command every agent to detain this foreign alien for and etc. And it would continue, but no charges, no crime. So I said to the agent, no one told me that my visa was under review. Sir, I don't know anything about that. I was told to be here to wait for you. And now I'm here to inform you, you are in this country illegally. I said, hang on a second, I'm not here illegally. My visa is until 2028. But it's been revoked, sir. I told him I'll just apply for an ESTA right now. He goes, it won't be approved, sir. I said, okay, I'm a British citizen. I'll just book a ticket now and go back to London. You know, there are 6 flights a day from San Francisco. That's not how this works, he said. As soon as he said this, 6, 7 agents, they appear around me, 5, 6 agents. And I'm looking and thinking, it's a lot of agents just for somebody like me. They escort me out of the airport, Dr. Hatim, and then there's a black car waiting for me with black windows. The stuff you see in those movies, you know, when they're kidnapping someone or abducting somebody. And they tell me, sir, get in the car. I said, I'm not getting in no car. They said, no, get in the car and hand over your phone. I said, I'm not giving you my phone. I'm a British citizen with rights. And bear in mind, I don't need to believe who you are, who you say you are. I want to call a lawyer. I need to call the British embassy. I need to let them know, sir, you need to hand over your phone. I'm not giving you my phone. I'm a British citizen. I have rights. They said, one guy said to me, you got 1 minute, like this. You got 1 minute. I thought, who do I call? Who do I call? Who do I call? I thought, Hussein Mailouche from CARE. So I messaged Hussein. I said, he must be awake. He replied to me in 10 seconds and told me, comply, but find out where they're taking you. And we're on it. We'll get ready. Then I said to them, I need to make a phone call to my family to let them know I'm okay. Dr. Hatim, from behind me, somebody grabs me, pushes me against the car, cuffs me from behind and says, you know what? That's enough. You're under arrest. I said, what am I under arrest for? And then later on, the cheek, they would write in the charge sheet that we informed him he's under arrest and we told him why, etc. None of that happened. Then they threw me into the car. And as we're driving, we arrive in the ICE processing center. They throw me in a cell. They leave me there for an hour. And then they come to me and they say to me, hey, sir, so you want to go home, right? And I said, yes. Just sign this deportation order and we'll send you right home. I said, what?
And up to that point, you called Hussam Alouche from CARE, the
I
LA
WhatsApped him. They
office.
wouldn't let me call him. I WhatsApped him.
So they did not actually read you any of your rights. There is no
None at all
to get you to possibly appear in front of a judge or anything other than just handing you a letter to sign that you accept to be summarily deported.
None of that. I went there. They gave me a piece of paper, Dr. Hatim, and they said to me, if you want to go home, just sign this letter. So I'm reading the letter. And it says, I am guilty of what I'm being charged with, of this, of overstaying. I am guilty of not obeying my visa, whatever, etc. And I agree to the deportation order. I said to the guy, listen, I haven't committed any crime. I'm not overstaying. My visa's till 2028. Sign it, you get to go home. Otherwise, sir, you're going to have to come with us. And I said, I'm not signing it. Can I call a lawyer? You'll get your lawyer call. Can I call a lawyer now? No. Can I call a lawyer, please? No. Then they cuffed me hands. So I was already cuffed on the hands. They cuffed my feet. They put a chain around me, like full on shackles, like you see. Then they bundled me into the back of a white van. And the van, Dr. Hatim, I know it gives the implication there's a lot of space in the back, but no. They've put me, it's like they've cut only a small space in the back. It's about 80 centimeters, maybe 1 meter maximum, by 4 meters. So you're sitting like this when you're sitting in the back of the van. And the van just drives. Guys, where am I going? Where am I going? Sir, get in the van. Where am I going? Get in the van. The van continues. I'm trying to look outside a small window. Do I remember the geography of California? I look, I can't make out where we're going. We drive for about 2 hours and a half. Then we arrive in a car park, Dr. Hat. And like the movies,
Mm,
they
mm,
swap me in the vehicles. So they take me out of the van and throw me into a black car again. And then the
mm,
black car drives another 2 hours and a half. When I tell the ICE agent, excuse me, where am I going? Where am I going? She was like, we're going to a facility. And then I asked more questions. She put the music volume up. So then we're
mm,
driving 2 hours and a half. We arrive in the facility. I won't go into too much detail what happened next, but I want to give certain flashpoints here. When I arrived in the facility, Dr. Hatton, in front of me in the corridor, also people who've been picked up, are two Indians and a Latino. The
mm,
Latino guy is being checked in first, and the lady says to him, "So where are you from?" And he says, as a joke, "I'm from Afghanistan." And she
mm,
says, "Oh, your people want to kill my people." And we all
mm,
went, "What? Your people, they want to kill Americans." So I poked my head out and I said, "Excuse me, that's categorically not true." And the Latino guy is going, I'm Mexican amigo. You know, I'm not
mm,
Afghan, I'm not. And she said, "No, it's true. They want to kill my people." To give you an indication of the mentality of some of the guards who are watching over the inmates of those particular facilities. When they take us in, they put us in the bunk, and you see it's overcrowded. 100 people in this hall and that.
mm,
And ICE, you can see the viciousness. They're acting with an impunity in that regard. And then once I was there, until the media headlines exploded, 2-3 days later, the guards particularly treat you with a particular cruelty. Only
mm.
afterwards they'd be like, "Oh, the famous one, make his cuffs a little bit lighter just so he doesn't write badly about us later on." But the overall process, Dr. Hatem, I think that if you watch the Hollywood movies, I used to think they were exaggerated. Now I know that they're based on reality. They know their own cruelty.
Now, as you were being arrested, transported, what was going through your mind? Were you thinking this is the normal experience of a Muslim, or were you playing these movies that you were watching and you saying, "I'm in a movie set"?
What's interesting is that on the Tuesday before I was incarcerated, I was sitting with a friend of mine, Mazen Mukhtar from Baitul Mal.
Mm,
And he
yes.
said to me, "How are you, Sami?" I said, "Sheikh, I feel like there are clouds that are gathering above me and something's coming, but I don't know what. Like, it feels a bit like something." And Muhammad Jalal, who was with me in Sacramento, I didn't remember this conversation. He reminded me of it when I came out. He said, at the end of
Mm,
the talk, we finished our Q&A, and then I grabbed the mic from him and I said, "Listen, I just need to say one more thing." And I spoke for 15 minutes. When I finished, I didn't want to offend him. So I'd said to him, "I'm sorry, Jalal, but I feel like this might be the last time I speak to an American audience." So I really
mm,
wanted to hit home the point about America first versus Israel first. But to be honest, if I have to be brutally honest, it's America who gave us this image that it's a country of rule of law. You hear these stories in Tunis, for example, where my father is
mm,
from, in Algeria, where suddenly they grab you and throw you in a black car. They don't tell you where you go. Or Amn ad-Dawla, the security apparatus
mm,
in Egypt. It's not something that you expect to happen in the United States of America. And not only that, I would later find that ICE, they use bureaucratic loopholes because they know what they're doing is illegal. So they try to
mm,
prevent you as much as possible from standing in front of the judge. So in this regard, to answer your question directly, even if I thought that maybe it could happen, part of me genuinely felt it doesn't happen in a land of law, land of free speech, home of the brave. This isn't post 9/11 anymore. Now that people have settled, there are some laws that are taking place. It's quite extraordinary, and even more extraordinary that most of the inmates tended to be of a certain color and complexion.
mm.
And you sort of felt that ICE were really targeting those particular colors.
Well, in here, maybe there is an element of idealizing the United States legal system,
Yeah,
even though the black and brown have always had the short end of the stick of
of
the
course.
US legal system. But maybe I could go back a little bit. It's your really speech and your engagement relative to the genocide and the critique of the Israel lobby, the critique of Israel political engagement in the United States that really shows that there are cracks that are taking place. Because when the only means to try to defend Israel is to silence the critic, that's a sign that the criticism and the challenge and the shift is occurring. So maybe you could speak a little bit about what you were speaking about in Malaysia, but also some of the discussions that you had in the US about the changes that you see relative to the Israel lobby position, the pro-Israel or Israel first crowd, and that really they're understanding that shift, the tipping point that has been arrived at. And your case possibly also fits into that landscape.
You know, Dr. Hatem, it's interesting. Somebody said to me when I came back, you know, the Zionist lobby, you know, they tried to show their power. And I said, no, this was a hysterical lashing out from a position of weakness. Because if you think about the broader timeline of what's happening, first they went after US citizens. They threatened Mehdi Hassan of removing his passport as a naturalized citizen. They dragged American Muslims for Palestine through the courts of Michigan. They dragged them through the courts of Nevada. In Michigan, the judge said, I think there's undue foreign influence over the attorney general. I want to investigate this first. Attorney general dropped the case. Then they went after in Nevada. The judge said, am I to understand that one expressed an opinion, the other? This is a land of free speech. Case dismissed. So they went after US citizens first, this extreme Israeli lobby. And they said, oh my God, it's not happening. So then they went after green card holders, Mahmoud Khalil and these others. And they're finding it's not easy to get rid of Mahmoud Khalil, that the New Jersey judge passed their ruling and Mahmoud Khalil ended up being released from detention. This case is still ongoing, but certainly it's not as easy to deport green card holders as they thought it would be. So then the Israeli lobby says, oh my God, green card, what's the next? Let's go after students, you know, who you teach. They went after student visas, Rumaysa Ozturk for writing an op-ed, Mohsen Mahdawi for going after Colombia, Liqa Kurdiya, for example, for joining some of the protests in Colombia and the like. And they realized Mohsen Mahdawi walked free, Rumaysa Ozturk walked free, Liqa Kurdiya, a judge twice has ruled that she's supposed to be released from the Texas facility, and ICE at the moment are just trying to find any way to delay and find a third country to take her and the like. When they failed on the citizens, then the green cards, then the defeat after defeat after defeat, they said, let's go after a British citizen who's on a B1, B2 visa for 10-year visa. And even then, they could not keep me or get me charged with anything whatsoever. The government lawyer came to my lawyers and said, listen, can we just clear this up? And, you know, he wants to go home. We'll make it easy. No challenge, no nothing. The point that I'm saying is that it's important to put it into context to see it for what it is, not what we think it is. We think it is that the Zionist lobby is so strong, but it's the opposite. It's so weak. They had to come after somebody like me. They had to come after visitors. They had to threaten America's image abroad about these World Cup goers who are coming next year to the World Cup. Does this mean if somebody holds a Palestine flag in an England versus United States match, that you're going to revoke the visa of the fans without telling them and then grab them on the street and then ship them off in the detention facilities and the like? It's ludicrous. And the reason why it's from a position of weakness, and this is the point, that it's not about Sami Hamdi here. Laura Loomer and this extreme Israeli lobby were not targeting me. They were targeting Americans. They were saying that, oh my God, these Americans are listening to Dr. Hatem and watching on social media and seeing the images of the Palestinians and the like, and their opinions are changing. We have to buy TikTok for 50 billion now. But the polls show that Israel is now unpopular and people sympathize with the Palestinians. So we need to try to pass a bill in Congress to ban the boycott. Oh no, Marjorie Taylor Greene won't let us pass the bill in the Congress. What do we do? Okay, let's buy CBS and let's get Barry Weiss to put her on top of CBS. We need to put filters on the information, because the raw information reaching the Americans is making the Americans' hearts changes. Oh my goodness, in New York, we have Cuomo. He didn't win the primary, but he's our guy. We need to support him. Democrat and Republican Zionists united together against Mamdani, and Mamdani ends up winning in a sort of ordinary American revolt against the party establishment. The point that I'm saying is this picture is not one of the Israeli lobby displaying strength, but that, as you said, the influence is cracking so badly and starting to crumble that they are lashing out to try to create a climate of fear. Who can I target and wave as a trophy to say, if you talk about Palestine, this is what happens to you? And that's why I think that they are the ones who are failing miserably. Because this, and I finish on this point, the sentiment that we got, Dr. Hatem, when the lawyer for the DHS came, bear in mind, privately, they were saying nothing like what they were saying publicly. Publicly, I would discover later that the DHS Twitter account was making all sorts of heinous allegations. I swear to you, privately, none of those allegations was mentioned. None of those allegations was put on the charge sheet. None of those allegations was brought before a court. None of those material being used online was brought before the court. On the contrary, the sentiment that we got from the lawyer was, that somebody in the State Department had sort of said, guys, what idiot listened to Laura Loomer? What idiot went after this guy and caused us this headache? What idiot listened to her? Almost as if there's a schism between this Israel first and America first that is becoming increasingly manifest. And this is the point that I'm making, in that my story is not one of Israel succeeding in silencing, but rather they're unable to do so. It's like they're playing whack-a-mole and they're unable to do so. And in the end, they ended up humiliated and I ended up walking free.
Yeah. So maybe you touch on in here on an issue that possibly you saw it in Europe, and in one of the polling relative to Europe by the pro-Israel think tanks and so on, that says one area where support for Israel increases is when they deploy Islamophobia. Right? It says that it shows the margin increases almost by 20 percentage points. So what we are seeing in terms of your case and others is the deployment of Islamophobia, and that's why these notions of trying to label you with all kinds of demonizing attributes, I don't like to use those because this affirms the paradigm. So how can you actually look at your case as almost paradigmatic and symbolic of the deployment of Islamophobia as the last resort to rescue a collapsing Israel image?
You know, Dr. Hatem, it was interesting that when the news came that the extreme Israeli lobby was spending $50 billion to buy TikTok, we were sitting, you know, with some tech guys and these others discussing, well, even if they buy TikTok, the algorithm works based on engagement with the consumers. So they've been trying to create all this sort of AI algorithm and the stuff, and it's been broken because of the millions of people who are talking about Palestine. And then somebody remarked and said, the tactic is not to push Israeli content. They know that if they say Israel, they lose support. If they say Tel Aviv, they lose support. If they say Netanyahu, they lose support. What they're going to do is they're going to play the Islamophobia trick, where they flood TikTok with everything that makes Muslims look bad, where they try to bring headlines to make Muslims look, to almost say, guys, I know you're hating us, but let's remind you of who you really hate. Let's make Muslims look in a bad light, moving the debate away from Palestine and Israel. So they're not going to talk about Israel anymore. They're only going to talk about Muslims and how they refuse to integrate and this and the like. But even on this, Dr. Hatem, there was a very interesting remark made by Marjorie Taylor Greene in an interview that she gave to CNN, or in one of the rallies that she gave, if I remember correctly. She said something along the lines of, have you all noticed that your social media, there's been an uptick in Islamophobic content? Mm-hmm. As if, she says, somebody has clicked the finger and decided to flood it. Your point is exactly correct. They cannot convince people to support Israel again. So what they're doing is they're saying that the messengers of the information, these people that you're listening to, this man with his leg blown off, this lady with her arms blown off, because she wears a hijab or has a beard or looks like they are of a different color shade, that automatically disqualifies them from being believed in anything that they say. It's like they're moving the debate. We can't win on Israel, so let's go back to Islamophobia. What I am hoping to see and what I am encouraged by is that once upon a time, these tactics worked. Once upon a time, even in the UK, it worked. They are trying now to reform Tommy Robinson's image. They are trying to reform Nigel Farage's image. But even now,
well, I don't know if Tommy Robinson, because his name now appears in the Epstein files.
And now
so
which might be
how is his image going to be?
but once upon a time, these tactics were foolproof. You throw the Islamophobic content, and wham, everywhere. This time, however, I almost feel like, and I'm not necessarily celebrating these individuals, I'm merely highlighting the dialogue. I'm very wary of how we portray these individuals. But when you look at Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and these others, and Candace Owens, who are openly saying, guys, they're trying to escape genocide by making you hate the Muslims. Tucker Carlson famously said in one of his podcasts, he says, you know, after 9/11, I was told that Islam is the problem, and I went with it. I went on camera and I said, Islam is the problem. But now I'm looking into it. Did you know that Islam means surrender? Like surrender to God? And as a Christian, that's a beautiful proposition. People aren't buying it anymore. Candace Owens reading out verses from the Quran. Nick Fuentes saying, don't let them use Islamophobia, you know, to distract you from what they're doing. People are aware of the game. They're aware of the tactics. The irony is they still believe this Islamophobia stuff still works. And maybe it might work in some quarters, which is why I said I'm more hoping than anything else in terms of how this pans out. But I think it reflects the malicious and dark nature that when they cannot convince the Americans of an argument, they choose to push back and play against that Islamophobia. And I think we still have a lot of work to do to really prevent this from taking over the minds of the American population.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of the discourse and so on. Just to be very, at least accurate, careful, Nick Fuentes and some of the white nationalists, white supremacists, they also have a very deep reservoir of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Of course, yeah.
And they navigate on this what you call trajectory. Sometimes they fall on defending of Muslims for promoting anti-Semitism, and sometimes they defend anti-Semitism to promote Islamophobia. Just, I know that
I don't think it would even be called defending Muslims. I don't think they're necessarily defending Muslims. I think it's more they've noticed it's a tactic.
Yeah.
I don't think they would want to defend Muslims, but certainly the point is that they are acknowledging it is a tactic as opposed to, adopting it in the way that they used to.
Yeah, because I'm always very, what you call cognizant, that's in some quarters of the Muslim landscape, they think that certain segments of the white supremacist, white nationalists taken on the Israel and the Israel lobby, they don't account for the deep reservoir of anti-Semitism that comes out, that is there. So just as a way to make sure that we navigate that well. I want to actually go back to your agreement to leave the United States and return home. So on what grounds were you able to actually to leave? Is it voluntary deportation? It is voluntary moving out of the country? I want to make sure that there was no guilt assigned to you in relations to your leaving the country.
So there were two judgments that led to the change in tone of the lawyer for the guy, or rather that led to the appointment of a special lawyer to negotiate the deal. So the first was on the third day of my detention.
Yeah.
The guard at about 8:30 p.m. said, "Hamdi, get ready, you're going to Fresno." And all the inmates went, "Oh my God, you're going to Fresno. Oh my God, you're going to Fresno. Oh my God." And I said, "What does it mean that I'm going to Fresno? They might be transferring you to Texas. You don't want to go Texas. They might be transferring you to Florida. You don't want to go Florida. Sami, you need to be careful. If you're taking to Fresno at this time, it means you're most likely going to be transferred. Sami, what ICE do is if they believe that your case is strong and the judge might rule in your favor, they transfer you to delay you going in front of the judge. Sami, you need to be careful."
That's what happened with Mahmoud Khalil in terms of moving in New Jersey and so on, then ending up in Louisiana. So that the strategy is keep shifting you through jurisdictions, and every time that you move through a jurisdiction, you have to have a lawyer, you have to have a procedure, and so on. And it's a dilatory tactic and also frustrating tactic. It's literally,
and G4S make a lot of money out of it. And G4S make a lot of money out of it, and Geo and these other companies make it. It's all third-party outsourcing. Yeah. So I called the lawyer and I said, they're taking me to Fresno. I don't know why, but the inmates think I might be getting transferred. They said, "Listen, hold tight. We're going to go immediately to the judge." They went to the judge at about 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. The judge ruled at 11 p.m., issued a restraining order on ICE. And the judge said in the ruling that I'm issuing this restraining order because based on the summary facts, this looks like there is a clear infringement on the First Amendment. Very powerful for the judge to say. They took me to Fresno. I had a miserable experience. They tried to make me sign a deportation order. And then they said to me, "Your court has been delayed by 4 days. It's supposed to be November 6th, then November 10th. Why has it been delayed?" "Because we changed something on the charge sheet." I said, "What did you change?" They kept the charge the same, overstaying. But what they wrote was, initially it said, "You landed in Santa Ana, California." I said, "I did." "We changed it to you were pre-cleared in Calgary, Canada," which is where I took off from. I said, "I don't understand. They're both true. Why does that make such a big difference?" "We had to change it, and therefore you have a delay of 4 days, with regards to your court. But if you want to go home, you can always sign this deportation order and you can go." I said, "I'm not signing anything. Get me back in the cell." And I stayed there for another 24 hours. The second incident with the federal judge, we had petitioned the federal judge, and the federal judge, out of concern of infringement of First Amendment, expedited my case. So the lawyer for the Department of Homeland Security tried to argue to the federal judge that a foreign alien that is not entitled to the rights of freedom of speech, and therefore the court does not have jurisdiction to look at this particular case. The judge responded within an hour saying, not only do we have jurisdiction, but we have reason to believe there's serious infringement on his rights to freedom of speech, and we will be looking at this case. The following day, the Department of Homeland Security appointed a specific lawyer for my case, who called, texted, and emailed my lawyers, something my lawyer said has not happened in 22 years of immigration law, given what they've practiced, saying, listen, we read an article by his wife in USA Today. We know that he wants to go home. If he applies for voluntary return, we will remove the removal order. We will remove the deportation order. We will not challenge his right to return home, and he can just go home and apply for a visa later on and come back to the United States. When I said to the lawyers, I said, the inmates have told me that when you agree to such a deal, they leave you waiting 2-3 months before they send you home. And the irony is that when I was actually going to the airport, a Filipino guy told me, you're so lucky. I applied to voluntary return 2 months ago and I'm still here. And they send you back within 48 hours. So the lawyer said, I've already pulled the strings. I've made all the phone calls. I've called in favors. If he applies to voluntarily return home, we'll clear the record and we'll make sure that he's home within 48 hours or 3 days maximum. So I said, okay, fine. What are my choices here? The lawyer said, you've got 2 choices. This technically keeps your record clean. You can go back, apply for a visa. Maybe they'll give it to you. Maybe they won't. It will depend on the political wind. But certainly there'll be nothing legally preventing you from applying for a visa again. Your other option is that you fight the constitutional ground. You have a chance of winning it because it's related to First Amendment, but you'll be here 1 year or 2 years. You could be here for quite some time while this plays out. So I was hesitant, Dr. Hatem, like, what do I do in that regard? I told him if it benefits more broadly, I will stay here. I don't mind. My family were like, it's better for you to come home. The other side was like, it would be good for us. We've never had a case like this where a foreign national has been detained in this regard. So I said to the lawyers, give me a couple of days. Let me pray istikhara and see where it goes. So I'm pacing around the room. I'm pacing around the hall. And I'm pacing and pacing and pacing. And then there's a brother, an inmate called Ismail. He came here, sought asylum, lived for 4 years, was crossing the road. And an ICE police officer said, excuse me. And he said, yes. Where are you from? And he said, I'm from Bangladesh, but I live in New York. And they grabbed him. And then they went and found out he's an asylum applicant and they detained him. No process, no nothing. But in any case, Ismail said to me, Brother Sami, you're not smiling or laughing today. This place is getting to you, huh? I told him, Ismail, it's not that. I've been offered a deal and it's a good deal. I think it's a victory, the way they've come and they've offered the deal. But I wonder how far I can push it. That maybe, if I stay, maybe I can get a constitutional win and the like. The lawyers were telling me in all cases, you'll be going home. It's just how long you want to wait before you go home. So I said to Ismail, I don't know whether to take the deal or not. Like, I'm stuck. So Ismail says to me, brother, don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Laura Luma put you in here to silence your voice. And she put you in here to scare the community. My brother, as long as you're here, your voice has disappeared. And as long as you're here, it agitates the community even more. If you're worried about the manner of your departure, then remember that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was denied his voice in Mecca, he didn't have a choice in the way that he departed. He departed in the middle of the night, fled Mecca, went to Medina, got his voice back, and came back to Mecca in glory 10 years later. My brother, if it's a matter of leaving, you're not better than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Go back to Medina, go to London, get your voice back, and come back to Medina in glory. Unless you think you're better than the Prophet.
We're not saying that London is Medina.
I'm happy to be home.
You're happy to be home.
But in any case, when he said it to me, I said, you know what? Maybe I'm missing the bigger picture. Absolutely right. Let me go get my voice back. This is a win. They haven't charged me with anything. My record is clear. I'm able to come back to America. Of course, there may be some political impediments, but certainly there are ways to work around that in that regard. And then I told them, okay, I'll take the deal. Within 48 hours, I was home. But I want to say just one final point here, Dr. Hatem. A funny exchange that took place. So ICE in the beginning were very vicious, tight cuffs, on your legs, on your hands. They with full impunity. When the news came that I was going to be released, and of course there's all these media headlines, and suddenly there's a focus on ICE. We're going to the airport. So the deal was, of course, no cuffs. I get to go with no cuffs and all this stuff and whatever. Okay, well, very good. So when I get to the airport, ICE are dropping me off. But for the 2.5-hour journey to the airport, the language of ICE was different. They started telling me sob stories about how hard it is making other people's lives miserable. You know, we're human too, and you know this, and the challenges that we have, and oh, this. And as I'm leaving the van, they were like, we didn't want to treat you like a criminal. It's just for our own safety. And, we're just trying to uphold the law. So, go easy on us. I told them, don't worry. I'm going to tell the world everything. I'm going to tell everything that happened. The point that I'm saying here is ICE are aware that what they're doing is not legal. What they're doing is not something that the public will be happy about. And they feel like they get away with it because a lot of people focus on ICE detaining people. They don't focus on the conditions ICE keeps them in. They don't focus on the bureaucratic loopholes that ICE uses to keep people there. I'll give you just one final example of it. There was a brother in one of the inmates. So the court has ruled that his asylum application is established. He's allowed to be in America. Get him out. ICE continued to detain him. He's still been there now for the last 16, 17 days since the judge ruled, because they're trying to find another country that's willing to take him, and they're trying to ship him off and then tell the judge, oh, he decided to return on his own. There was another incident of a Texan. He's 19 years in Texas. Wife is a citizen. His kids are a citizen. When the judge ruled that he should go, they wanted to deport him to Congo. ICE kept him in detention and are now calling the Ghana embassy to say to them, do you want him? Can we send him to you? Even though he has no relation to Ghana whatsoever. And this is the point. I don't think that ICE believe what they're doing is legal. They know that it's illegal. So are G4S. And the more pressure you put on them, the more those cracks actually start to emerge. And I wonder how we can exacerbate those cracks.
Well, just in terms of the legality and lack thereof, the president issued executive orders that have empowered ICE to literally bypass all the checks and balances in the country. And then the Supreme Court issued a horrific ruling allowing ICE to pick people based on racial perception, which targets predominantly Latinos and so on. And then the third aspect, and I think this is also very interesting going back to history, there's a famous case, which is the LA 8 case, which was a case of 7 Palestinians in Kenya that changed the constitutional protections of First Amendment. Janet Reno versus ADC, the Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee of 1998, that literally said that non-citizen aliens do not enjoy the First Amendment protection, right? So that's a case that goes back to 1998. So we still need to actually undo the long history of anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia that got the Supreme Court to rule in 1998 under a Democratic presidency. Right? So your experience and possibly other cases that you are speaking about might end up having to challenge and get into the Supreme Court. And with the current Supreme Court, I don't know where the ruling will end up at that time. Now, I want to maybe this is just as a background, how is your experience as you came back to the UK? Because the UK has also been deploying Islamophobic and also anti-immigrant sentiment. I just heard that they're going to change the residency law where you have to wait 24 years before you actually become permanent. So it seems that there's a transatlantic deployment of fear, of Islamophobia, of anti-immigrant sentiments on the back of Muslims, but also using Palestine and the advocacy of Palestine as a dagger for this type of approach.
Dr. Hatem, I just before I start answering the question, you made a very valid point about the Constitutional Court. And actually, I still have the avenue, according to my lawyers, to pursue on constitutional grounds the illegality of removing my visa on First Amendment. So the argument is that a case can be made in the court that while the State Department has the right to revoke a visa when it wants, can it revoke a visa on First Amendment grounds? And that's something that the lawyers actually said to me. They said, this is something that we want to challenge and the like. And I'm actually in the process of mulling to what extent I'm willing to go through litigation in that regard. And actually what you said actually resonates very deeply in that I'm still very much undecided in that regard. The interesting thing to note is in preparation for this, they appointed a heavyweight lawyer and then asked the court, will he still go ahead with it? And I said that I need time to consider. We'll shelve it for now until I decide to reopen it. But maybe that's a discussion for something more private. But in any case, with regards to coming back to the UK, one of the things that made the huge difference was that in the first day when they detained me, and Laura Loomer claimed credit for it and tried to push this very Islamophobic narrative, there were two possible reactions, one that I feared and one that I was relieved actually happened. The first was that everybody would run away from me and allow them to write the story while my voice was within the facility, unable to emerge within those four walls. In that case, they would have steamrolled with all the Islamophobic tropes, and they would have hoped that what happened in the past will happen again. The immediate reaction of the community made all of the difference. My wife described it as a roar. The roar from the community and the uproar that took place meant that journalists who were hesitant in the UK immediately bought into the narrative, which is the correct one, which is a British citizen just got detained for expressing his opinion. This is outrageous that America would do it to a British citizen. Oh my God, does this mean it will happen to me if I go to America? Does this mean it happen to me? I had even Zionists, self-proclaimed Zionists, who expressed sympathy and said to me that even though I reject Zionism in its entirety, I've never been a two-state solution individual. I don't believe in theft in any way whatsoever. I believe in the coexistence that existed for centuries. Even I had a certain Zionist, I won't mention him, before he interviewed me, he said, you know, Mr. Hamdi, I'm disgusted at the way you were treated. I believe in freedom of speech, even if I disagree with your stuff on Palestine. This meant that when I came to the UK, I found a very warm reception from the journalists. Welcome home, welcome back. That must have been wild. What's going on in America? I can't believe that they did that to you. You know what? I'm not going to go to America. I was supposed to go next week. I'm not going. The ITV presenter told my wife, you know, maybe I won't. But that happened because the reaction of the community was one in which we're not going to let you take him. We're going to roar and say we're rejecting your Islamophobic tropes. This is about freedom of speech. And that resonated very deeply, not only with the Muslim audience, but even with a non-Muslim audience as well. And to put it on a lighter note, you know, it's less academic, but a lighter note. On the Wednesday when the DHS challenged the jurisdiction of the court to look into my case, that day was a bit hard. I was preparing myself that maybe I might be here 6, 7, 8 months. So I'm a believer in divinity. So I believe in istikhara. So I prayed istikhara and I said, Allahumma, I'm not complaining about my situation, but I know that Ibrahim alayhi salam asked you for proof that you give life to the death. أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن. Do you not believe? قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن قلبي. No, but just for my heart to be at ease. Allahumma, I'm not doubting. I'm just asking for something that puts my heart at ease. And I went to sleep. I saw a dream, Dr. Hatem, that me and Sheikh Omar Sulaiman is just us sitting in a masjid. It looked like Valley Ranch, but it looked a bit different. And I'm sitting, hiding under the window. So the window is there, and I'm hiding under the window, and Sheikh Omar is standing looking out the window. And I'm hiding because I can see riot police outside, and they're intending to come into the masjid. So as they try to come through the door, these like Muslims who've just finished their wudu, they step in front of the agents and come into the mosque. So the agents come in again, and then people have finished wudu, they've come, so the agents are, and it keeps happening until the masjid is full, like, rammed with people, and there's no room for the agents to enter. Then Sheikh Omar stands and says, everybody, I know that you've noticed those people outside, they're here for Sami, but wallah, they're not taking him. And I woke up. Next morning, the lawyers told me, listen, they're coming for a deal. They're saying, listen, you know, in any, but one of the reasons that I mentioned this is that often the community can set the tone for the remit that these oppressors operate in. If you are quiet, they will steamroll you. But if you're loud, they hesitate. I'm not saying you'll win every time. I'm saying that people have more power than they think they do. I remember that when the headlines started coming out, the guards were visibly like, oh, the famous one. Guys, like, make sure that he doesn't have bad stuff to write. And the inmates would say, you are lucky people talk about you. You're lucky you're not forgotten. You're lucky that they're shouting for you. The point being is they're very much aware of the power of the reaction of the community or ordinary people in speaking about these issues, whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's, the overreach of the government and the like. And often the greatest power the government has is not actually the tools at its disposal, but the fear of the community to stand up for what's right and actually say, actually, you're not going to get away from this, that it is actually a struggle that we should be embarking on in this regard. And I know I don't need to tell you this because I've shared panels with you, and I know that you don't hold back in any way whatsoever. But in any case, I do think that when I came back to the UK, that initial reaction set the tone. And even when Laura Loomer tried to say that, oh my God, why did they let him go? Why didn't they charge him? But it's still a victory for me. The overwhelming sentiment amongst the journalists is that, well done, we put pressure, we were able to get you out. And now let's find a way politically to sort yourself coming back to America.
So as we get into the conclusion or end toward the end, you're beginning to mention about the advocacy and the mobilization and the critical role that the community plays. And maybe you could speak as we conclude about advice, reflection, that what the community should engage with, the type of support that you received, how it could be continued, as we're dealing right now, as you possibly heard, of a case of care in Texas, which also are requiring for us to mobilize, be active as a community and advocacy. So how is your case actually could be looked upon as an important piece for transforming our public engagement? And you mentioned about fear is an important commodity and how to overcome fear.
I think I often argue that sometimes people doubt the power of belief. And I explain what I mean. So what I was really warmed by was that the Muslim community came out, but so did a lot of the non-Muslim community. I remember being on the plane when I was flying home, and there was a lady next to me. She'd seen the guards. They brought me on the plane, and she said to me, look, I need to use the bathroom, but before I go, can I just confirm that you're not a serial killer? Because I saw the guards. So I panicked, like a Muslim guy, Los Angeles to London flight, whatever. Like I don't. So I told her the whole story from start to finish. Dinesh D'Souza, Ted Cruz, Laura Loomer, etc. And I had Wi-Fi. So I showed her the Reuters article. British journalist detained for criticizing Israel. CNN, British journalist detained for criticizing Israel. And she said, oh my God. I'm a Republican and this offends me deeply. I'm sympathetic to the Israelis. I will be honest with you, but not at the expense of my freedom of speech. This is absolutely horrifying and disgusting. And people on the plane were agreeing in that regard. When I later came out and was catching up on the 2 weeks, I found many who would say, I may not like his views on Palestine, but why is my freedom of speech being targeted in this regard? The point is, allies can come from the most unlikeliest of places as long as you're willing to be loud and to present your case, not necessarily in a way that I've come here to ruin your lives. But guys, listen, my case is one of humanity. The Palestinian case is a cause for humanity. It's a just case. You don't need malicious tactics the way that AIPAC use. You don't need to hoodwink the American population. There are very legitimate, credible arguments why it's in the interest of the American to support Palestine as opposed to support to the Israelis. But one has to believe in the capacity of hearts flipping. They have to believe that when Allah says the hearts can flip, they must believe that hearts can truly flip, because then that opens multiple different avenues. For example, when Greg Abbott says that CARE is a terrorist organization, why is he saying that? Because he has an election coming up against the Attorney General who's won over the Muslims as a result of what happened to Epic. So now he believes, I can't win over the Muslims. Let me go more far right so I can win their votes instead. And it's a political tactic in order for him to win the governor election. Americans would be horrified if they found out that Greg Abbott was playing these games just for the sake of electoral gains and risking the stability of Texas when Muslims have lived there in peace for so long. It's about this ability to be able to communicate. When I talked about the case of Liqa Kurdiya and people presented and said, this girl is languishing in a Texas facility, somebody said to me, it's because we have the funds for a legal team. We don't have the ability to have a media team. And the media team, in your case, Sami, played a big role. Dr. Hatem, the team that volunteered for me, They were able to get the articles in all these different media outlets. They were phenomenally talented in that regard, which shows that when the community comes together, we're capable of extraordinary things. The issue is not the absence of power. The issue is the inability to wield that power because we're unable to see the bigger picture of how these individual cases can affect us moving forward. And that's why I think that moving forward, in my opinion, I think the community works better when there is a lightning rod for that effort. In this case, it was Sami Hamdi. We know Sami, and everybody focused on it. I'm out. I'm fine. Let's highlight these cases. Liqa Kurdiya. Let's highlight these cases. Yaqub Era, who's stuck in Texas. Let's give people tangible things in what they can do, because you'll find there's a media talent who volunteer himself, a legal team who volunteer himself, an academic to give the correct arguments and debate on the more broader level. You'll find those who want to donate, who are tired of donating to charities because they feel it's not bringing long-term change, who'll say, you know what, I want to fund this particular initiative to protect care from Greg Abbott's, assault, and I want to fund civil liberties organizations and more broadly, more PACs in order to facilitate some sort of political change. But the reason I go back to the issue of belief is because everybody knows their talents, but the fear factor prevents them from volunteering those talents because they're scared of a power that's not as powerful as they think it is. Zionism is not as strong as we think it is. It's a spider's web. Dr. Hatem, for more than 70 years, people tried to speak to America about the scourge of Zionism and how it is a threat to the international order. We were blocked by the various filters of information, media outlets, and we couldn't reach the American people. When social media and TikTok came along, the first time in 78 years where we're able to talk to the Americans directly, we broke the Zionist propaganda in less than 18 months. Meaning the issue was never the power that we had. The issue was just put me in front of the American and their heart will flip. Put me in front of the society and Zionism will break down in such an extent that, Dr. Hatem, no one's given you $15 billion to boost your entity in Berkeley. But your voice alone broke $50 billion TikTok that they're spending to go and buy TikTok, which means that that voice that you have, the power that you have, it may not be in the billions, but it's superior to the 50 billion that they are spending. And that's why my message to the community is a simple one. The inmate said to me, Sami, if the community had not moved for you, you would have been here 6 months. And there is a brother called Marwan Najjar. He's an AI expert from Bay Area. He was the last visitor I had before I was released. So I said to him, what's the reaction of the community given I've taken this deal? And he said to me, if I show you my WhatsApp messages, some people are like, oh my God, we actually did it. Like, pressure actually works. We actually got him out. Why is it that when Allah says that you have this power, when Allah says that you're capable of flipping those hearts, we were like, Sadaqallahu al-Azim. But when Sami came out, everybody went, oh my God, we actually did it. Have faith, not only in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have faith in Allah's ability to be able to deliver you and create a new America in your own generation and lifetime. Believe that in 23 years, Mecca can flip. Believe in 23 years, Quraysh can flip. Believe that your ability to speak haqq and to speak truth can make ordinary Americans turn around. And the final point I'll say is this, even though I said that many times, but the final point I'll say is this. I traveled to every state in America except New Hampshire. Dr. Hatem, I never had, and bear in mind, I'm aware this is privilege, but I never had a situation where I would present the case for America supporting Palestine and an American would say to me, get out of here. I always had, oh my God, I never knew that. Oh my God, really? Oh my God, is it really that bad? Oh my God, I didn't know my taxpayer money was coming to it. I think that if we can believe that there is an ignorance that needs to be redressed with education and that our voice is more powerful than propaganda, I truly believe that as Zionism is breaking apart, we could see it collapse entirely in our lifetime. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I hope the community believes it wholeheartedly.
On this note, on having deep faith in being grounded in justice, and the highest form of struggle is a statement of truth in front of an unjust ruler, I do thank you and much gratitude. I'm very happy to see you back with your family, with your friends, hugging your loved ones and being able to be in the company of those who Love you and appreciate you. Your voice continue to have an impact. I saw many of the interviews that you had. We are really thrilled for you to be able to be back in the UK. And inshallah, God willing, you will be able to come back and visit with us under different and more possibly impactful circumstances. So, Sami, thank you for sharing your experience and shining light on the alarming erosion of rights and accountability. Your case underscores a dangerous reality. When systems operate in secrecy, discrimination thrives unchecked. To our listeners, the Islamophobia files exist precisely for moments like those to keep records, challenge abuse, and build collective power. We encourage you to follow Sami's story, demand transparency from the institutions responsible, and never allow fear to silence truth. You could buy TikTok, but you cannot buy the truth. And therefore, in our effort, we continue to shine light on these cases. Until next episode, this is Dr. Hatem Bazian reminding you that the fight against Islamophobia requires courage, solidarity, and unwavering commitment to justice. Thank you for listening. Stay vigilant and stay empowered. Assalamu alaikum.
Good.